front of Hanuman in the form of a vast and terrible Rakshasi. She boomed out to Hanuman, "The gods have ordained you will be my food, O jewel among monkeys. Quickly enter my mouth. Brahma has granted me a boon that none who come before me can escape being eaten." Brahma's boon can't be checked, right? Surasa opened her cavernous mouth, which was set with a row of fierce teeth. Hanuman smiled and said to the Naga goddess, "I'm on a mission to serve Ram, the Lord of creation. You should not impede me. If I must be eaten by you, then pray wait here. Once I have completed my duty, I shall doubtlessly return, and you may devour me then as you please." The Naga replied that he would not be able to pass by her, for such was the boon given by Brahma. She expanded her mouth even more as Hanuman came closer. Her jaws stretched for 8 miles, but Hanuman quickly grew to 16 miles. She then expanded her mouth to 20 miles, and Hanuman exceeded that size with his body. As the Naga grew even further, Hanuman suddenly contracted himself down to the size of a thumb. He entered her mouth, he went inside her throat, and quickly came out again. He returned to his normal size and said, "I have honored Brahma's boon. Now let me pass and fulfill my mission. I wish you well." The Naga goddess resumed her original form and praised Hanuman, blessing him to be successful in his quest. Hanuman moved on with the speed of Garuda. He saw many celestial chariots drawn by lions, tigers, elephants, birds, and serpents as he coursed along the heavenly airways. Gandharvas, Yakshas, Vidyadharas, and other celestial beings were thronging the skies. Great heroes who had lain down their lives in battle rose upward through the lofty region, their ethereal bodies shining like fire. As Hanuman shot through the sky, he was seen from below by a Rakshasa woman named Simhika. She gazed hungrily upon the monkey's enormous body, desiring to devour him. She used her mystic power to suddenly seize his shadow as it sped over the water. Hanuman felt his progress arrested. He looked all around and saw beneath him Simhika's hideous form rising up from the sea, her terrific mouth open wide to swallow him. She thundered like a mass of clouds. Hanuman fearlessly entered her mouth. As he entered her body, the citizen gods cried out, "Alas!" But Hanuman, whose body was as hard as a diamond, began to tear the demon's vitals apart. He cleft her heart into two and burst out from the side of her body. The Rakshasi screamed and fell dead into the sea. Seeing Hanuman unscathed and flying onwards, the gods praised him, saying, "Your success is certain. He who possesses firmness, vision, understanding, and skill never fails in his undertakings." Hanuman continued on, adored by the divine beings. Soon he saw in the distance a large island which appeared like a mass of clouds on the horizon. As he came closer, he saw the shore of Lanka, skirted by forests and high mountains. Hanuman returned to his normal size. Mm-hmm. I think that's part of it. Hanuman returned to his normal size in order to avoid being seen. Flying over the island, he came upon the city of Lanka, which was perched on the summit of Trikuta. mountain. As he climbed down the mountainside, he considered how to best enter the city. Hanuman surveyed the region. It was covered with beautiful woods filled with flowering and fruit-bearing trees of all kinds. There were meadows and lotus ponds and pleasure groves of every description. The aroma of flowers wafted on cool breezes, and the sounds of various birds filled the air. Hanuman made his way to the edge of the city, which was encircled by a wide, deep moat. A golden wall ran around the city. Large pennants with small golden bells tied to them blew in the wind atop that wall. Ferocious Rakshasas ranged on the ramparts that ran along the wall. In their hands, they held formidable-looking bows and other fierce weapons. Behind the wall, Hanuman could see lofty mansions and palaces, some golden and others as white as the moon. He climbed a high tree and gazed upon the city. Hundreds of tall and impressive buildings ran along elevated white tiled roads. In front of them were many wonderful golden archways adorned with flowering creepers. The city gave off a roaring sound and appeared like the capital of the gods. To Hanuman it seemed to be sailing in the air. Lanka, which had been constructed by the celestial architect Vishwakarma, was inconceivably splendid, and it awed Hanuman's mind. Reaching the northern gate, he sat and thought. He looked upon Lanka, which was guarded by innumerable gallant and terrible Rakshasas, as one might view a cave full of venomous serpents. As he gazed up at the high wall, Hanuman reflected, how would the monkeys ever overpower this city? For a start, only he, Sugriva and Angada and Nila, the monkey general, could even cross the ocean and reach there. Then there would only be 4 against an uncountable horde of Rakshasas, headed by the invincible Ravana himself. What would they do? Hanuman decided to first find Sita and ensure that she was safe. After all, those were his instructions. Then he could consider further action. He pondered deeply how to go about searching for the princess and yet not be discovered. Having taken such a great leap over the ocean, he did not want to fail now. It would be best to enter Lanka under the cover of darkness in an inconspicuous form. Hanuman decided to wait until sunset and enter the city as a small monkey. Going from house to house, he would locate Sita and then decide how to approach her. That night, the full moon rose in a clear sky, appearing like a swan swimming in a lake. Hanuman stood up, ready to enter the city. As he approached the wall, however, the presiding deity of Lanka came before him. She was fierce and ugly and gave out a horrible yell. In a discordant voice, she asked Hanuman, "Who are you, trying to covertly enter this city? You shall never be allowed to pass by me, oh monkey." Hanuman cared little for the Rakshasa goddess. He did not reveal his name, but rather asked her to first identify herself. She replied in harsh tones that she was Ravana's servant. She guarded Lanka and would now kill Hanuman for his insolence in trying to assail the city. Hanuman stood firm as a mountain. He replied that he would enter the city no matter who tried to prevent him. The Rakshasi immediately struck him with her hand. Unmoved by that blow and becoming furious, Hanuman clenched his fist and hit her, but without his full force, as she was a woman. Nevertheless, struck by Hanuman, the demon goddess fell prostrate to the ground. After some moments, she recovered and begged Hanuman to spare her. She revealed to Hanuman that Brahma had told her the end of the Rakshasas would come soon after she was overpowered by a monkey. That time had clearly arrived. The words of Brahma could never prove false. The time for the destruction of Ravana and the Rakshasas was nigh. The Rakshasi told Hanuman to proceed into the city, and then she disappeared. Hanuman assumed a form no bigger than a cat. Springing up, he climbed over the outer wall and began to penetrate the city. He moved along the main road, which was lit by celestial gems, studying the golden archways along its sides. The road was covered with brightly colored flowers. From the houses he heard sounds of laughter and music, as well as the tinkling of ornaments and jewels. Those houses had crystal entrances and verandas of coral and lapis lazuli. They were adorned with gold images of thunderbolts and planets and lattice windows of gold embedded with diamonds, rubies, and emeralds. Opulent city. Hanuman went quickly from house to house, searching for signs of Sita. He saw many demons engaged in amorous activities in their houses, with damsels resembling apsaras. In some places, there were groups of Rakshasas praising Ravana. In other places, some Rakshasas, known as Yatudhanas, were studying the scriptures and chanting sacred hymns. In public squares, Hanuman beheld wrestling matches between Rakshasas of huge proportions, roaring at each other in anger. Hanuman saw also thousands of Rakshasa warriors holding bows, swords, and other terrible-looking weapons. As he moved unnoticed along the city streets, Hanuman himself, a military expert, could recognize Ravana's many variously disguised spies. Gradually he approached Ravana's palace. In front of it was a garrison of soldiers, 100,000 in number. The palace itself stood on the summit of Trikuta mountain, looking like a great white cloud. It was circled by a number of moats, adorned with lotuses and lilies. Hanuman swam across the moats and, in his diminutive form, easily entered through the latticed gates in the gold brick walls. Thousands of exceptionally powerful Rakshasas stood on guard, but they paid no heed. As Hanuman moved to the first courtyard, he saw numerous wonderful conveyances, such as golden chariots, palanquins, and large aerial cars. There were thousands of horses, some as black as night, some red-hued, and others as white as snow. Massive elephants bedecked with jewels stood, looking like clouds with flashes of lightning. Within the courtyard were mansions occupied by arrogant and intoxicated demons. Hanuman could hear them laughing and shouting at one another in divisive tones. He silently entered each of the mansions, looking everywhere for Sita. Within every house, he saw many women, some embracing their partners, some adorning themselves with excellent dresses, some sleeping, and others, angered out of love, hissing like serpents. All the women were highly attractive, with countenances like the full moon, and their dark eyes covered by curling lashes. Although Hanuman saw innumerable women, he did not see Sita anywhere. Hanuman wandered through the dozens of 7-storied mansions and finally entered the inner palace building where Ravana kept his women. It was embellished everywhere with pearls and gems of great value. The scent of aloe and sandalwood incense wafted and the sound of celestial music could be heard. Hanuman padded over the highly polished marble floor, which was spread with celestial textiles. The walls were made of gold, decorated with silver carvings studded with gems. Thousands of exquisitely beautiful maidens moved about, their tinkling gold ornaments sounding together like the gentle waves of the sea. Adding to that delightful sound was the deep vibration of meghas, Megha, and kettle drums. Megha? Somebody look it up in your Google Guru and see what they say a megha is. Megha.
Megha is cloud. Cloud.
Flower?
Cloud. Cloud. A cloud.
Cloud?
Cloud.
Megha.
Megha.
Megha, a cloud. Was deep vibration like meghas and kettle drums. Okay. Hanuman considered Ravana's palace to be the ornament of Lanka. In some rooms he found galleries of heavenly paintings and carvings of every kind. Sometimes the palace opened out to large grassy enclosures with ponds full of swans surrounded by blossoming trees full of peacocks and other colorful birds. Hanuman saw sacrificial fires attended by ascetic Rakshasas who chanted Vedic mantras. Here and there were heaps of precious stones and other collected treasures. Couches, seats, and beds were of the most wonderful design and made of gold, coral, and celestial woods. With his mind awed, Hanuman moved on without stopping, intent on discovering Sita. He found the Pushpaka chariot lying in the center of Ravana's palace. It resembled a large mansion and shone like the midday sun. The chariot was embellished with every kind of celestial jewel and adorned with carvings of gold and silver, birds made of cat's eye, certain kind of stone, I think, as well as others fashioned by coral and silver, decorated the chariot along with lovely serpents made of jewels. Horses and elephants made entirely of refined gold stood on the sides of Pushpaka. There were large gold and crystal pleasure houses containing many excellent seats. That's on the Pushpaka. Golden stairways led up to platforms radiant with sapphires and emeralds. Garlands and wreaths of heavenly flowers were hung everywhere. Seen on the spacious central floor of the chariot was a large pond in which a number of carved elephants stood, holding golden lotuses in their trunks and offering worship to a breathtakingly beautiful form of goddess Lakshmi. Hanuman was astonished to see the mountain-like chariot which hung suspended in the air. The monkey moved on quickly, searching Ravana's apartments, which covered 4 miles in width and 8 in length. Everywhere were powerful-looking Rakshasas who held terrible weapons and looked alert in all directions. By his powers of illusion, Hanuman kept himself invisible to all the guards. He then entered Ravana's personal bedchambers. Its floor was covered with slabs of crystal, inlaid with figures made of ivory, pearls, diamonds, coral, silver, and gold. Large pillars of gems rose up to the roof, which was studded with innumerable jewels and looked like the star-spangled sky at night. On the walls were carvings of eagles with huge outspread wings. Murals depicting the heavenly planets hung there on the walls, and the floors were covered by large silk carpets embroidered with designs of mountains, forests, and rivers. The odor of celestial food reached Hanuman's nostrils, calling him like a loved one, beckoning a dear relative. He felt all 5 senses being simultaneously attracted by the delights of Ravana's palace. The monkey considered that he had entered the highest abode of paradise. He compared it only to Indra's palace or the abode of Brahma himself, fixing his mind upon his purpose. Like a consummate yogi meditating on the Supreme, Hanuman continued to search for Sita. Remember, this is being sung, and it's like this is the refrain, searching for Sita. His mind was fixed. As he went into each separate chamber, Hanuman saw many maidens looking like heavenly nymphs. They were half-dressed and lying asleep, overpowered by intoxication and lovemaking, adorned with jeweled girdles and anklets. They emanated a fragrance of lotus flowers. Their large lips, red like copper, parted slightly, showing rows of teeth that resembled pearls. Crushed garlands lay here and there, along with discarded silk raiments. The delicate-limbed ladies, with their clothes and necklaces thrown about and other ornaments fallen to the floor by their beds. With their large, dark-lashed eyes closed, they looked like lotuses with their petals closed at night. To Hanuman they appeared like a number of brilliant meteors fallen from heaven and united there in Ravana's chambers. Although Ravana's wives, who were daughters of Gandharvas, rishis, and powerful demons, were beautiful beyond compare, Hanuman considered them nothing in comparison to Sita. His mind did not waver even slightly from his mission upon seeing them. As he went by the sleeping maidens, he came to a prominent dais made of crystal and bedecked with precious stones. It appeared like a celestial structure with large gold and ivory couch placed on it. Over the top of the brilliant couch hung a white canopy wreathed with garlands of lotuses and red ashok flowers. Lying there fast asleep was Ravana himself. Hanuman saw he was extremely handsome, with a complexion like a dark cloud. He was adorned with bright flashing earrings and clad in robes of gold and crimson. His limbs were smeared with red sandal paste, and he resembled a cloud reddened by the sunset and lit by flashes of lightning. Decorated with garlands and jewels, he seemed like Mount Mandara, covered with clusters of trees and flowers. Hanuman looked with disgust upon the great demon, who lay snoring like an elephant. He shrank back and gazed upon the demon from a distance. Ravana, was only displaying one of his 10 heads and 2 of his arms. To Hanuman, those arms appeared like a couple of large, 5-hooded serpents lying asleep in a cave on Mount Mandara. They were well-muscled and thick as tree trunks, scarred from the many battles Ravana had fought with the gods. On his head wore a brilliant diadem. Diadem. D-I-A-D-E-M. Huh? Crown? Okay. Makes sense. That's not familiar with that word. So he wore it on his head, and around his neck hung a string of pearls and gold chains. As the demon breathed out, the odor of liquor mixed with mango and nutmeg filled the room. At his feet were many youthful women. They had all fallen asleep in various positions, one of them hugging her veena, another seated with a small drum under her arm, another clutching a pair of tambourines. Next to Ravana on the couch was a lady of astounding beauty, golden complexion with exquisite formed limbs, decorated with the best of jewels. Seeing her lying there, endowed with celestial splendor and the exuberance of youth, Hanuman thought for a moment that she might be Sita. Filled with delight, he leaped about, waving his arms and kissing his tail. Displaying his monkey nature, he frolicked around, climbing the pillars and dropping to the floor, pacing back and forth and flipping over again and again. Suddenly he paused in thought. This surely could not be Sita. Separated from Ram, the princess would never be able to sleep or eat or even adorn herself, nor would she consort with another man even in her mind, even if he be the Lord of the celestials himself. None could be equal. None could equal Ram, that divine lady's beloved husband. Hanuman examined the sleeping maiden by Ravana's side closely. Her face showed no signs of grieving or sorrow. There was no doubt. This could not be Sita. He moved on quickly, keener than ever to locate the princess. He continued searching Ravana's vast bedchamber. There were thousands of women lying everywhere. All of them were beautiful and adorned with blazing golden ornaments. Hanuman saw tables spread with every kind of food and drink, placed in gold and crystal vessels. The floor was strewn with celestial flowers and looked most charming, shedding a bright luster into the great hall. But although he scrupulously examined every part of the room, he did not see Sita anywhere. As Hanuman looked upon the many semi-clad women, he felt a grave misgiving. Was this not sinful? To look upon the wives of others, especially in such a condition, was always condemned by Scripture. Even looking upon the sinful Ravana, who had stolen others' wives, was itself sinful. Hanuman felt disturbed, but he considered his mission. Where else could he find Sita? He had to look for her among Ravana's women, and he had not looked at them with even a slight tinge of lust. His mind was steady, firmly fixed on Ram's service. It was not possible that sin could overcome him in such circumstances. Feeling reassured but simultaneously despondent and not finding Sita, Hanuman came out of the bedchamber. Where should he look now? How could he return without finding Sita? What would he say to Sugriva and Ram when they asked, "What did you accomplish upon reaching Lanka?" Maybe that sorrowful lady had died of grief. Or perhaps the Rakshas had devoured her. Hanuman could not bear such thoughts. He had to keep looking. If he could not find Sita, then he would fast until death. Thinking in this way, he went along the paths outside the palace. As he walked, he saw ahead of him the palace gardens. They had not yet been searched. Hanuman prayed to the gods that he might at last succeed in finding Sita. Now, it wasn't when we read yesterday, if I'm not mistaken, Sampati said she was in the gardens. So why didn't he look there first? It wouldn't be as exciting, I guess. He paused as he reached the gardens and thought of Ram. Thrilled at the prospect of finding the princess, he leaped onto the top of the surrounding wall. From his vantage point, Hanuman surveyed the lovely grove, which was lit by the moon. A sweet fragrance reached his nostrils as he looked over the large enclosure. He saw blossoming trees of every kind, as well as silvery creepers and golden shrubs. Flowers grew everywhere along the sides of the immaculate lawns. Peacocks and parrots perched on the trees, along with many other varieties of colorful birds. Hanuman ran quickly along the wall, carefully examining the garden. He jumped from tree to tree, and they shed their flowers, making the earth appear like a richly adorned woman. As he leaped, he awoke flocks of birds who flew upwards, shaking the branches of the trees and showering Hanuman with flowers. Hanuman moved impetuously, anxious to find Sita. He saw ponds of different shapes, full of lotuses and sleeping swans. There were bathing pools with golden steps leading down to them, and banks of fine sand made entirely of crushed pearls. Wow, fancy sand. Okay, where was I? Rivulets ran between silver trees, covered over by flowers of gold. Fruits, such as Hanuman had never seen, hung from the boughs of the trees everywhere the monkey looked. He was wonderstruck at the opulence. In the center of the garden, he came upon a large simsapa tree. He climbed to its top and gazed around in all directions, eager to catch sight of Sita. At a distance, he saw a temple situated in a large grove of Ashok trees. Those trees, with their thousands of bright red blossoms appearing in every season, seemed as though made entirely of flowers. Simply by looking upon those splendid trees, a man would feel his grief dispelled. The lofty temple amid the trees was standing on 1,000 marble pillars. It looked like Mount Kailash, Shiva's glorious abode. Steps of coral rose up to a large terrace of refined gold. Hanuman spotted a woman lying near the temple. She was surrounded by Rakshasas and tossing about on the ground. Hanuman leaped through the trees to take a closer look. The woman was clad in soiled garments, but she was beautiful like a diamond covered by dust. Her slender body was smeared with dirt. She lay repeatedly, sighing and seeming distraught, her face streaked with tears. This was surely Sita. Hanuman felt his heart leap with joy, but it was agony to see her in such a wretched condition, appearing in every way like an eclipsed moon. Although fallen to the ground and weeping, she spread about her a golden luster. Enmeshed in a mighty web of grief, she seemed like a flame entwined by smoke. Her dark eyes, with their long black lashes, darted about helplessly like those of a fawn snared by a hunter. Hanuman gazed at her. He recognized the celestial yellow garment she had been seen waving. He had seen waving in the breeze when Ravana had passed over Rishamukh. This was undoubtedly the lady seized by that demon. The monkey gazed with sorrow at the princess. How powerful and inscrutable was destiny. Sita was the daughter of a king and the wife of an invincible hero. Yet she was now suffering torment. She was gentle, kind, and always virtuous, undeserving of any pain. How then had she been placed in such terrible circumstances? It was inconceivable. Hanuman thought of Ram. How could he now best fulfill the Lord's purpose? Sita was difficult to approach because she was surrounded by hundreds of fierce Rakshasas. Hanuman examined them carefully. All of the Rakshasas were ugly and grossly misshapen. Some had one eye in their forehead. Others had huge ears that covered their bodies. Some had heads like boars, tigers, buffaloes, goats, deer, and foxes. Some had their head sunk into their chests. They were of all sizes, some very tall, other dwarf, humpbacks. Some had the legs and feet of elephants, camels, or horses. Some had abominably long and twisted noses. Some had large pointed ears or fierce lion-like teeth. Others had hair down to their feet and hands with claws. The sight of the Rakshasas made one's hair stand on end. They clutched various types of weapons and stood or sat about Sita, watching all directions. In their midst, the noble princess seemed like the moon, besieged by malevolent planets. Hanuman thought carefully. He remained hiding among the boughs of the tree. Dawn was approaching, and the sky to the east was beginning to lighten. Just at that time, Ravana was being awakened. Musical instruments were played, and poets sang his glories. The demon rose up with his hair and garments in disarray, still intoxicated by the strong liquors he had drunk the night before. Immediately he thought of Sita. Quickly arranging his dress and adorning himself with every kind of ornament, Ravana went out of his rooms towards the gardens and made his way hastily to the Ashok grove. Behind him came 100 beautiful maidens, their large hips and breasts swaying as they struggled to keep up with him. They carried whisks with golden handles, oil torches, pitchers of wine, and pure white umbrellas. Their gold ornaments jangled together, and flowers fell from their hair and garlands as they ran. Moving behind the demon, they appeared like flashes of lightning following a cloud. Although he possessed great power, the evil-minded Ravana was a slave to his lusty desires. With his mind fixed upon Sita, he passed through the golden, gem-encrusted arches at the entrance to the Ashok grove. In a godlike human form, he headed straight for the place where Sita lay, longing to get another sight of the divine princess. As he walked, he composed poetic phrases in his mind to win Sita over. Hanuman, concealed in his tree, heard the tinkling of ankle bells approaching. He looked around and saw Ravana making his way along the path, illumined on all sides by bright torches. The demon moved quickly with his slanted coppery eyes staring straight ahead. He was adjusting his upper garment of pure white silk, embellished with flowers and pearls. Preoccupied with his thoughts of Sita, he got his golden armlet entangled with his necklace of shining jewels, and he struggled to release it as he strode along the path. Hanuman remained completely still as Ravana passed by the tree where he was hidden. Once the group of women had passed him, however, Hanuman leaped down and silently followed them toward Sita. The monkey hid behind the trunk of a large tree close to Sita and cautiously peered around it to see Ram's glorious consort seated on the ground, trembling at the sight of Ravana approaching her. Her knees were drawn up to her chest, and she held them tight with her arms. Ravana, who appeared youthful and majestic, who shone with a brilliant aura, stood before the princess. She looked miserable and stricken, like a rose creeper torn from a tree and thrown to the ground. She appeared like a shattered faith, or a frustrated hope, or an abandoned treasure. She was covered with dirt, yet charming as a pure white lotus stained with mud. Weeping incessantly, she tossed about on the bare earth, her mind absorbed in thoughts of Ram. The Rakshasa king sought to seduce her, as a fool would walk heedlessly towards a steep precipice. He gazed down at the forlorn Sita, who did not even glance upon him. With her palms folded, she prayed to Vishnu that he might soon bring Ram to her presence. Ravana said, "O most splendid jewel among women, do not be afraid of me. I am here only to render you service. Why do you lie here in a wretched condition? Rise up and enjoy with me. I shall provide you with pleasures only the gods know." She turned her face away in contempt, her body racked by sobs. Ravana had tried to win her over each day since taking her captive, but his attempts sickened her. She longed for the day when Ram would come and destroy the demon. Surely that time would come soon. She did not feel that she would take much more of Ravana's torment. She could not take much more. Sita's resistance only made Ravana desire for her the more insistent. He stared at her incomparable beautiful form. Even though she had been fasting and had not washed since he had kidnapped her. She was still far more lovely than any of his consorts. Indeed, if it were not for Nalakuvara's curse. You all know what that curse was, right? Okay. If anybody wants to hear, you all know. Okay. The demon folded his hands in supplication. What will you gain by lying here grieving? Your youth is passing away swiftly and will soon be gone. Enjoy with me now while you can. There are none in this universe who can compare with me in virility and power. You are the finest of all women. I believe that after creating you, the celebrated Brahma must have retired, seeing his work to have reached perfection. Ravana offered her the position of his principal queen. He would subjugate the entire world and offer it to her father, Janaka. He had already conquered the gods in heaven and now stood unchallenged as the most powerful person in the universe. What could Ram do against him? Sita should stop thinking of her puny prince, who was clad in rags and lived in a lonely forest. Perhaps, Ravana suggested, Ram had already died. There was no chance that she would ever see him again. And even if he should somehow find his way to Lanka, he would be immediately destroyed by Ravana, standing at the head of an unlimited number of invincible Rakshasas. The demon went on, his voice rising and falling melodiously as he implored Sita, become my wife. Oh, most beloved one, and enjoy life. Put on the best of garments and gold ornaments. Shake off your grief and range freely with me in delightful groves along the seashore. She shuddered at Ravana's sinful suggestion. Without looking at him, this happened twice. And placing a symbolic blade of grass between herself and the demon, she replied that there's volumes of commentary on the significance of the blade of grass. And if you're interested, there's a recording of one devotee named Shamakund who lives in Bangalore who really loves Ramayana. And he gave a lecture. Where were we? Pandharpur. We're in Pandharpur. ISKCON Pandharpur Temple. And he was speaking on this, and it's all recorded. Details and details. 19 different reasons. It's really beautiful. So she placed a blade of grass between her and Ravana. And she replied, give up your futile hope. You no more deserve me than a sinful man deserves perfection. How do you expect me to perform an act condemned by all pious women? How do you imagine that I will rest upon the arm of any other man after I have once rested upon Ram's arm? Do you not realize that molesting the wives of others leads only to destruction? Evidently, there is no one in Lanka who knows morality, or perhaps you have become so degraded that you are simply unable to heed good advice. Ravana snorted in anger. He clenched and unclenched his fists. There seemed to be no way of winning this woman. His eyes remained fixed upon her as she continued without looking at him. You should know me to be inseparable from Ram, as sunlight is inseparable from the sun. Unite me with Ram at once if you wish to do good for yourself and your Rakshasa race. Make friends with Ram. Otherwise, see your city, yourself, and all the demons destroyed for good. If I am kept here, you will soon see well-aimed arrows joining end to end, filling the sky that will rain down upon Lanka like many fire-mouthed serpents. You were able to steal me only when Ram and his brother were not present. Indeed, O weak one, it is not possible for you to stand in the sight of Ram and Lakshman any more than a dog can remain under the gaze of a pair of lions. Ooh. She rebuked Ravana further. Even if he sought shelter on the peak of Mount Meru or descended to Varuna's abode, he would not escape from Ram. By his wicked act of stealing Sita, he was already killed by his own destiny. Ram would be the instrument to fulfill that fate. With the evil Ravana remaining their leader, the Rakshasa race would be destroyed to their roots. She spoke harshly. I would burn you to ashes myself by the power of my asceticism and chastity, but I do not have my Lord's order, nor do I wish to waste my ascetic merits on such a wretch as yourself. Ravana was furious. Breathing heavily, he spoke slowly, his deep voice barely constraining his rage. Because of your insolent words, you deserve to be put to death. Only my love for you prevents me from having you immediately killed. You have a few more months left of your 1-year reprieve. If by then you have not submitted to me, then my cooks will mince you up for my morning meal. The demon then turned away from Sita. His eyes flared, and his tongue darted out of his mouth. His shining diadem, crown, and his broad, powerful shoulders shook with his anger. His red robe swirled about him as he walked away with his large, reddish gold earrings swinging back and forth. With his dark blue waistcloth, he appeared like a mountain topped with crimson oxides and lit by lightning bolts. As he left the grove, he turned to the Rakshasas. Use whatever means you can to change the princess's mind by soft words, coercion, and threats. Force her to submit. Dissuade her from her thoughts of Ram, and convince her to accept me. This will be your own interests, O Rakshasas. With a roar of frustration, Ravana left the garden, his heavy footfalls receding into the distance. As Hanuman continued to watch, the fierce Rakshasas began to harass Sita, asking in rasping and grating voices why she is reluctant to accept Ravana as her lord. The Rakshasa king was the son of a great rishi. He had vanquished the 33 principal gods in battle. Even Indra could not stand before him. Now, that very Ravana was bowing at her feet, begging her favor. He was prepared to renounce his principal consort, the chaste and beautiful Mandodari, for Sita's sake. Numerous Rakshasas cajoled Sita in various ways. They told her to stop pining foolishly for Ram, a mere human. Of what consequence was Ram when compared to Ravana? She obviously had no idea what was best for her. She turned away from the Rakshasas. Their advice was useless. She could no more abandon Ram than heat could abandon fire. She spoke with tear-filled eyes. Devour me if you will. I will never become Ravana's wife. As Sachi waits upon Indra, as Arundhati upon Vashishta, and Rohini upon the moon god, I will always wait upon my Lord. The Rakshasas were filled with rage when Sita rejected their counsel. They resorted to harsh and threatening language, licking their protruding lips with their dart-like tongues. They raised their axes and other weapons at Sita. Sita stood up and walked toward the tree where Hanuman was hiding, with a group of Rakshasas surrounding her and intimidating her. Seeing her approach, the monkey quickly climbed up into the branches of the tree. As he looked down from the tree, he saw Sita, severely afflicted by her Rakshasi guards. They spoke fiercely. Submit to Ravana, O princess. At this very day, I shall tear out your heart and eat it. brandishing a huge dart. One Rakshasi said, "For a long time, I have wanted to feast on your liver and spleen, as well as your swollen breasts, and indeed all your limbs." Just a page and a half left. Hanuman, burned with anger, he felt the impulse to leap down amid the Rakshasas and immediately thrash them, but he restrained himself, intelligently waiting for an opportunity to speak with Sita. If he revealed himself now, there would be chaos, and the chance to reassure Sita would be lost. Continuously tormented, Sita fell to the ground weeping. She cried out to the Rakshasas, "A human woman is not fit to be wife of a Rakshasa king. Therefore, finish me now, O Rakshasas, end my misery." She embraced the tree, calling out Ram's name. Her face was pale, and she shook with sobs. As she tossed her head about, her long braid of hair writhed like a black snake. She wondered, what kind of sin must she have committed in her past life that she must now endure this suffering? If it were not for her longing to again see Ram, she would have ended her own life. How could she endure another visit from Ravana? She turned to the Rakshasas, who were still threatening her as she lay clutching the tree. "Oh, wicked ones, I would not touch Ravana even with my left foot. That evil one should understand it now. I would not go to him even under the threat of being transfixed, hacked to pieces, roasted in fire, and hurled down from a mountain peaks." The princess thought continuously of Ram. Why had he not come to rescue her? Surely he had not abandoned her. Perhaps he did not know where she was, but Jatayu must have told them. Or maybe the bird died before getting the chance. If Ram knew her to be in Lanka, then without doubt he would have reduced the city to ashes by now. The ocean would present no problem. Ram's fiery arrows would dry it up in an instant. But what if Ram had perished from grief? Being unable to find her, Lakshmana would also die, seeing his brother gone. Maybe after losing her, Ram had practiced yoga and become detached from worldly things, such as love for his wife. But that could not be possible in one like Ram. He would never become detached from his duty. Protecting one's wife was always the duty of pious men. Sita lamented, thinking only of her husband. She envied the perfect mystics who had transcended the dualities of happiness and distress. For them, the loss of relatives did not cause any sorrow, nor did they long for any pleasing thing. If only she could experience their peace. As she lay absorbed in such thoughts, a Rakshasi named Trijata stepped forward. Trijata to the rescue. And restrained her companions. She had just risen from sleep and told them of a dream she had experienced. Quote, "I saw a shining personality who was surely Ram, mounted upon a celestial chariot drawn by 1,000 horses. Coursing through the air, he was united with Sita. The couple wore white robes and white garlands and were ablaze with splendor. I also saw Ravana, robed in black, with a red garland sitting on a chariot drawn by asses." Trijata described her dream in detail. Ravana had entered a fearful darkness, his body smeared with excrement. She saw all of Ravana's sons and ministers with their heads shaved and bodies bathed with oil. She saw Lanka being set alight by an agile monkey, and all the Rakshasas disappearing into a pool of cow dung. Last paragraph. The Rakshasis knew the science of interpreting dreams. It seemed from Trijata's dream that a great calamity was about to befall Ravana. Sita was heartened by Trijata. She sat up, and as she did so, she felt her left eye throbbing and her left arm palpitating. This was an auspicious omen. That omen, along with Trijata's dream, gave Sita hope. She felt that Ram must surely be near. The Rakshasis fell away from her, some of them running to report to Ravana. Pretty exciting. I mean, we just read 17 pages. It just went very swiftly. So everyone's familiar with the story, the Ramayana story, and hearing it again and again is very wonderful. Just one comment, because of the time, I'll restrict myself a bit. A number of acharyas or commentators from the Sri Vaishnava line hold this sequence of events to be like a living entity that strays from the personality of Godhead. From the point where Sita starts contemplating something that a conditioned soul contemplates, that is, enjoying separately. When she saw the deer, it was all about how she wanted to enjoy the deer. It wasn't about Ram, it was about her enjoyment of an object. And this and that, and insulting Lakshman, and etc. And for that, then Ravana comes and takes her. And then the next sequence is how the Lord feels when a living entity goes away from him. And he wants to have someone, a guru, intercede on his behalf and help bring that wayward soul back. And for the guru to do that, he's first tested by the Lord. Ram examined him in many ways, finally empowered him specifically. Here's the ring. I know you'll be successful. And here's your 2 instructions. It was to, find Sita and, find the whereabouts of where Ravana resides and make sure that Sita is well. Come back and report. 2 things. So he's, obstacles and obstacles and obstacles and obstacles and everything, without all the everything. So here he is in the Ashok Grove, and he sees this terrible scene. The guru is seeing this terrible scene. And yet there's signs of this little Trijata's dream. She's known as kind of like a mystic lady. So she would from time to time apparently have some kind of mystical report to the others, and they had confidence in her having that capacity. So the dream was like a certainty. Although ordered by Ravan to do a certainty, and they're subservient to Ravan. But this statement by Trijata is the only thing that held them back. And then poor Sita, and considering maybe this, maybe that, maybe the other thing. So the soul's wishing to again take the shelter of the Supreme Lord. This is their line. A number of Sri Vaishnava Acharyas. Hanuman is the Guru, Ram is Vishnu, Sita is the wayward soul. From that time that she desires independent enjoyment. So in desiring independent enjoyment, it's very problematic. It leads to a lot of trouble. And now she's, learned her lesson, but it's not just, okay, the lesson is learned and now you do a U-turn. Because we also, to a degree, have learned our lessons. We're reading in the morning from Uddhava Gita. Really nice section. It's like Bhagavad Gita. It's Krishna's. The rest of the Bhagavatam is about Krishna, except this section. It's Krishna about Krishna. And a big obstacle we're reading for 3 chapters is attachment to being the enjoyer of temporary things, the senses and sense objects, and finding happiness over there in sense objects. And then hearing it again and again, it's still the tendency persists. Now, with Sita's case, it isn't persisting. But there's something that Hanuman has to do. He has to reassure Sita, that's coming tomorrow, reassure Sita all kinds of ways. And finally, when that confidence in his being Ram's messenger and the message itself is secured, it's a function that we all have to play. Now, not just, the guru in the traditional sense of guru, but each of us in interaction with others to help them restore their confidence in taking shelter. And, it's not easy. It doesn't happen swiftly. But that's a function that we can also play in assisting Ram bringing souls back, or God bringing souls back to the place of real shelter. It's a nice comparison. According to these acharyas, the whole of Ramayana is a treatise on surrender. Different features of it, different features of the process of surrender, but the process of surrender. And this is a big one. And the function of Guru to restore that position. Okay, so let's see if there's some discussion. It's already 7 minutes before 8. We have some portable microphone in the back. There's a hand up.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. As we all know that...
This is a unidirectional microphone. You have to hold it like that.
This.
There you go. Thanks.
Okay. Hare Krishna Maharaj. As we all know that His Grace Pankajanga Prabhu has left his body. Could you give some comments about him?
About Pankajangri? Sure. Did you happen to read what Madhavananda wrote? Do you know who Madhavananda is? Disciple of Gaur Govinda Maharaj that lives in, he used to live in Bhubaneswar, now he lives in Puri. He wrote something. Did you see that?
Was it on the Facebook, Maharaj?
Huh?
Was it on the Facebook, or was it on...
I can forward it to somebody. I'll forward it to you, Aradhita, and you forward it to whoever, her and whoever else. You forward it to her, she can give to others. It's very short, and something. You're asking something. Yeah, he writes. I feel though sadness in my heart for Pankaj Angri's departure because it was glorious. The life that he lived, the way that he left his body in the Holy Dham. We know his destination from Scripture. He was dear to Prabhupada. There's another little Prabhupada's deep appreciation of he and Jananivas. They're really good. They don't know anything about other than deity worship. That's their life, and it's been like that for umpteen years. So, it's a glorious life and a glorious departure. So his, I feel no sadness on his behalf. I feel sadness for the people that are feeling sadness in his physical absence because he, such an elevated person to associate with. But so aside from what we're feeling, someone's departure is wonderful that in that circumstance. May any one of us come even close to such a life lived in exclusive devotion to Sri Sri Radhamadava and in the Holy Dham, surrounded by loving devotees with abundant kirtan and the blessings of Prabhupada, specifically upon him and his brother. Specifically, blessings. May we be so fortunate. Not so likely, but very fortunate person. No, it's unfortunate that he won't be able to continue doing the service that he loved. But everyone has to go, and he went to the right place. Anything else?
Thank you, Guru Maharaj. So, about the analogy that you just commented on, being Mother Sita diverting her attention from Lord Ram, and
Could you turn that speaker so it's facing to me? I can probably hear better. All the way around. What? Let's see.
okay.
That's good. That's much better. Go ahead.
So my understanding is Mother Sita is the internal potency of
Yes.
Lord Ram. So how can she be?
She's like. She's the internal potency. She's not a jiva.
So how can her divert? How can she be attached to deer or?
It was an act to help facilitate the whole of the Lord's Leela. Without saying all the different elements of the whole Leela.
Yeah.
It brought about the destruction of the whole Rakshasa race. Rakshasas don't normally inhabit the earth. At that time they were, but they have their other residences in other realms. But they were overrunning the Earth planet, and it was part of the plan to rid the Earth of the Rakshasas. So, how is it? By the inspiration of the Supreme Lord.
So it's just a Leela. That's.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
And to help us understand all kinds of things, the consequences of separate enjoyment, etc.
Maharaj, can I ask you a non-Ramayana question?
Sure.
So the body, we know it has gross, subtle elements, and those are the gross elements are tangible. We understand. The subtle elements are also tangible. I mean, for example, I can understand my mind and intelligence, and beyond that is the soul and super soul. And the presence of soul, I understand. I know I exist. So that's beyond my mental level. But the presence of super soul, Paramatma, I understand at my mental level because of Shastra and sadhus like you. Could you give some practical tips by which I can realize it deeper beyond mental level?
Wonderful question. Thank you. There's a very special verse in purport in Canto 2, and could you send me a text message? Or could you right now send me a text message? Remind me to send to you that verse in purport so you can forward it to our host here. And in that purport, it speaks, the verse speaks about taking help from the intelligence one can realize God. It's not by mental speculation, it's by help of intelligence. So supersoul can also be, because supersoul is the source of intelligence. So with the intelligence, one can understand that without the help of the supersoul, one can't understand anything. One can understand. So it's very, you have to read it many times, but it's a practical step in at least becoming conceptually convinced. Not that you're not, but becoming conceptually convinced. Beyond the mind is the intelligence, because that was your question. Beyond the mind is the intelligence. With the help of intelligence, one can understand the supersoul. Now, there are other intuitive understandings that, let's just give, some of Prabhupada's examples. The example of a thief, the example of a cat. The example of the thief is he wants to steal, and Supersoul gives him intelligence. So it's the dark of night, and he's sneaking around, and Supersoul says, "Don't go now, someone's coming." And then they pass, "Okay, now is your chance." Or another example is the example of the cat who waits for the housewife to leave, and the cat then jumps up on the table and drinks the milk. So intelligence, where does it come from? It's by inference. It's not a proof, but it's an inference. Beyond the mind is to understand there's a source from which intelligence comes. That source from which intelligence comes for all living entities is the supersoul. And I want to be, so then there's your question specifically is some practical tips. So it really takes something more than inference and logic. It takes, to realize the supersoul, it takes a mind that's fixed. And by different methods, the mind can become fixed. But that's practical.
So it's like practicing daily to remind oneself that this is the mercy of supersoul or things like that, or
it's not just, it's a principle. Where does intelligence come from? The birds that fly south in the winter, or the fish that swim upstream when it's time for laying their eggs, or whatever, where does intelligence come from? In all, etc., etc. How does the little baby kitten know to go to the mother to take milk? Where does this intelligence coming from? So one can see it in practical life. But so if you're We see things when we're open to see things, you know? And if the concept is there, and I want to understand the concept, you're looking and you'll see, because you're eager to experience and more deeply understand the concept. So you have the question is that the jigyasa, the inquisitiveness of where's intelligence coming from. I'll give here's another example. It depends, there's different levels of sophistication in asking that question. Here's one from Sadhaputta. You know Sadhaputta, right? Sadhaputta. For those that may not know, he was a scientist. I mean, his PhD at Cornell University was in mathematics. So he has a mathematic disposition. Their numbers don't lie. He was a mathematician. So he wrote in one of his articles in Mechanistic and Non-Mechanistic Science, he takes on the topic of inspiration. And he goes into mathematical detail of so many angstrom units of brain and how many calculations can a brain make in any in the time of a moment or a second. And it's mathematically not possible that, and he gives some specific examples in the realm of mathematics, that some person, decades before there was even theoretical mathematics, solved some mathematical problems down to detail. And then when mathematic theory got caught up, they confirmed what he had suspected. So how is it possible? Or, other examples and other examples. How did Mozart, who would get up in the morning and go for a walk, and in his mind appeared a whole symphony, come back and write it down? So how did that happen? Where did that intelligence come from? It doesn't come from angstrom units of brain and brain cells. It doesn't come that way. Where does it come from? Mathematically, it's just not possible. It cannot.
So my thinking is, how do we sink this idea deep into?
The answer is the same. There's if you're deeply asking the question, you'll see the answer. Because you're deeply asking the question, the doors will open. It's just how nature works. When you look at the world through a lens, that's what you see. It's how spiritual reality works. It's how material intelligence works. It's the principle of life. So one more time, by sincerely asking the question, by different methods, different approaches, because you keep asking the question, and doors will open that you didn't even see the door before, and the door opens, and there's answers. The biblical saying is, seek and ye shall find. But the Vedic principle is Brahma Jigyasa. So just take one piece. Where does intelligence come from? Because we know from Bhagavad Gita, Supersoul is the source of knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness. Intelligence comes from Supersoul. Intelligence of the cat, the intelligence of the thief, and the intelligence in Mozart, and the intelligence in whatever that fellow was that came up with mathematical solutions decades before there was even theory to deal with it. And it happened in a flash, like poof. So when you're eager, you can see. When you're eager to understand with your intelligence, then you'll understand. Where's the intelligence come from? How am I going to understand the answer to this question? You keep asking the question. You'll hit walls, but then you'll also see some doors open. And that's just the empiric approach. What to speak of a deeper approach of let's take the statement, the name and Krishna, the person, are different, non-different, because of his absolute nature. So one may contemplate that. Bhaktisiddhanta says the mind cannot understand that. The human mind cannot understand that because it's transcendental. But it's knowable. But if you keep asking the question, and how is it knowable? He gives the answer how it's knowable. By sound. By eagerness, it's the inquisitiveness again. By the eagerness to connect through sound with Krishna, the mind becomes captured. And when the mind becomes captured, then you can go beyond the mind. You get the experience. The name and Krishna are non-different. But otherwise, it's beyond us to understand and to know. But one can experience it. But you have to want to. Otherwise, it's not going to fall from the sky. I mean, Krishna could give causeless mercy and one becomes a kripa siddha. But so it's the eagerness to know, and then one can know. So it's practical. But it's not just a prayer you may say in the morning or something. It's your whole being. And bhakti is to bring us to that. We're all practicing, all of us in the room here, we're practicing bhakti in different stages. So it starts with some inquisitiveness, some faith, and some etc. Sadhu Sangha, Bhajana Kriya. So now how to get to the stage where we can understand more than what we understand today. Mercy and the eagerness to make that connection stronger. That's practical. Those are some practical tips.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Ramayana related, hopefully. How are we doing online? Something? There's one? Okay. Pass the microphone forward. Anyone else in the room want to say something? You have to just wave your hand. We'll take care of.
From Sanchari, I am looking for some clarification on a seeming paradox in Hanuman's rationale as he looks for Sita. On one hand, Hanuman recognizes that Sita's virtue would set her apart from anyone else. On the other, Hanuman still looked in Ravana's bedchambers and mistook one of the ladies for Sita, which seems inconsistent as one of Sita's most beautiful virtues is her chastity. How do we understand Hanuman's thought process here, especially as his position is that of a pure devotee?
Well, that's certainly not the first place I would look. And it's not like a fiction story that it makes the story more interesting by Valmiki writing this, and now we get a picture of, the different places in Ravana's personal life. That would be a good literary reason, but that's not why he's writing what happened. And well, let's go back to the previous question. The intelligence that was given to Hanuman was supplied from what source? From Super Soul. So Super Soul was guiding, and Hanuman was exercising according to the guidance, just as we are doing according to whatever intelligence Super Soul gives. It's, of course, Guru and Sadhu, but Super Soul gives to us, and as we move along the path of life. So we're acting to the best of our capacity. We're not pure devotees. But a pure devotee, Hanuman being a pure devotee, is still following the same principle. So Super Soul wanted him to experience what he experienced, and for us to understand what he understood. And the thought process of, the thought process of considering the beauty, etc., but no, it's not possible. And he then admonishing himself for even thinking that thought. So it's to help us understand, one of the reasons, is to help us understand we may think some foolish thoughts, and we may also admonish ourselves for thinking such a foolish thought of whatever it might be. It's instructive. You can say Krishna, and Lord Ramachandra is using Hanuman to instruct us in what to do when you're engaged in service and you think a bad thought about something. How do you do the course correction? Or what did Hanuman do for course correction? But it seems because it's repeated, repetition gives a hint that wherever he was going, he had one intention: find Sita. That was the instruction. That was his meditation. So when he was here, when he was there, when he was wherever he was, it was one meditation, one pointed. Vyavasayatmika buddhi. So it seems that it's specifically in response to Sanchari's question. Super Soul is guiding Hanuman to help us understand how our activities should be fixed upon one purpose when we're looking in maybe not some good places or the most ideal places to find the fulfillment of our purpose. Stay fixed on the purpose.
Next question from Amara Devi Dasi. What is the role of super soul or intelligence when one is confused or has hazy vision?
When one does what?
When one is confused or has hazy vision?
One has hazy vision? Hazy vision? What's the role of intelligence?
Super soul and intelligence.
Oh, Super Soul is sending the signal, but we got the signal blocked. He doesn't give us, silly signals. We have the signals blocked. Due to our attachments, we'll get some alternative reading when our vision is hazy. So, yeyatam mam prapadyante tangstadaiva pajamyaham. That's how to understand. It's our regard for Krishna is going to give us intelligence that's maybe hazy or sharp, depending on our intention and what's important to us. And if we've got the wrong idea, then we'll get intelligent how to steal or how to jump on the table and get the milk, depending upon your disposition. Okay, that's it, right? More?
Next question from Girivaradaridas. I am very appreciative of Hanuman's focus on the goal of searching for Mother Sita and not drifting away from all of Lanka's attractions. As a sadhaka, how can we cultivate it?
Follow Hanuman. Continue reading from scripture where a person's so focused, as you take so many examples that are focused and take inspiration from those personalities, purification and inspiration. It works that way. Okay. Anything else in the room? Yeah. Okay, fine. Okay, you have to turn the power on.
I got a little confused, I think. So when you say a thief gets the intelligence from the super soul,
Yes.
but the thief becomes a thief by practice. So it's like a chicken and egg type. Did the super soul inspire somebody to become a thief?
No.
So how did he become a thief in the first place to get?
By bad association.
Oh.
Prabhupada speaks like that even good souls are good by bad association, they become bad. So the soul isn't bad, it's just that your association is bad association that brings bad behaviors or attitudes and contemplations. That's it. You're letting me off easy. Okay, in the back, way in the back.
So Maharaj, about the super soul, so like you were saying that because of bad association, we either become a thief or we become a devotee. So Ravana.
Well, no, it's not exactly like that. There has to be a say yes to it. There can be bad association and not succumb to it. One can have good association and not become like it. There has to be some free will choice involved in all of this.
But Maharaj, Ravana, he also has a super soul, right?
Oh, yeah.
So is it because of bad association his behavior was?
No, that's how he started. He was the son of Vishrava. And Vishrava was good. And it was mentioned. He was the son of a great rishi, an elevated person.
But again, in the same token, Prahlad Maharaj was a devotee, right? Although Hiranyakashipu was demonic.
Yeah. So wait, let me catch what you're saying. Say it again, slowly and clearly.
So I'm wondering, how is the super soul guiding us?
How is the super soul guiding demons? Same way as guiding the thief or guiding the cat or guiding you and me. Yeyatamam prapadyante. He's guiding according to their disposition. How they have regard for him, he reciprocates. That's how.
Okay, thank you.
Done. There's one more? Done. Aradhita, is that it? Okay. Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai.